Hey everyone, so I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about autism, or more specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the isolation many people with autism feel as well as their families and what we can do about it. So I'll preface this by saying it's challenging to speak about autism because autism does not fit neatly into a nice little box. Autism is actually referred to as the autism spectrum disorder because there's a wide range of disorders that fall under the umbrella called autism. So when I speak today, what I say may be spot on accurate for one person with autism or their family. I might completely miss the boat on someone else. It's very hard to generalize, but without generalizing, I don't know where to begin. So I'm going to generalize with that apology in advance that I'm going to exclude some people in the spectrum when I talk about this. So the isolation. One of the challenges that people with autism face is that autism affects the brain. And because it affects the brain, it has an effect on personality and behavior. And it's these personalities and behaviors that can lead to the isolation. I'll give you a couple general examples. Many people with autism have a difficult time picking up on social cues. It's just a common characteristic. For example, if I said something to you that offends you or hurts your feelings, I'm going to be able to tell almost immediately by the look on your face that I've made this social error, and I'll probably apologize for it right away. But more important, I'm going to learn from this, and then when I speak to you later, I'm not going to repeat the same thing. This is just something we all take for granted. It's how we learn. Well, many people with autism have difficulty on picking up on things such as facial expressions. There's a part of the brain called the fusiform, and they've learned that this very specific part of the brain interprets facial expressions. And the way they can tell is they will put me or you into a machine and they'll show us pictures of different faces and facial expressions, and they'll watch as this part of the brain lights up with electricity and activity. This is what happens when we see faces and recognize faces and interpret expressions. When they put people with autism in there, many people with autism, when shown those same faces and facial expressions, that part of the brain doesn't light up at all, or it lights up a little bit, or it lights up erratically. But it's the disability causing this part of the brain not to act right. The reason I point this out is because it's important to know that this inability to pick up on social cues is not a lack of caring, it's not a lack of trying, it's literally a physical disability making this thing that, again, we take for granted challenging. Now, another thing that we also take for granted is something called the theory of mind. That thing I just mentioned a minute ago that hurt your feelings or offended you, well, I probably won't even say that thing to you because I have the ability to imagine what the thing I just said is, how it's going to make you feel. I can put myself into another mind and I can make an educated guess what the response will be to what I say. Again, this is something that is not something we're born with. This is a learned skill. It happens to us between the ages of 3 and 5, normal and typical development. Many people with autism don't develop that skill or just don't develop it well. Now, if you can imagine the challenge of going through life, first, not being able to know in advance how what you say or what you do is going to affect someone else, or at the very least, it's very difficult. And then when you do say or do something that has an effect, not being able to get that instant feedback that the rest of us do to learn from that the effect that what we just said has. Now, this is what can lead to isolation. I like to think that if somebody bumps into us and we turn and look and we see them with a pair of dark sunglasses and a cane, we immediately realize they're blind. We instantly, just about everybody, will forgive them for bumping into us. Many people with autism will bump into us verbally, but this is one of the many challenges with autism. It's invisible. When we turn to look at the person with autism who bumped into us verbally, we can't see the disability. And because we can't see the disability, I think it's a normal human reaction to pull away from a person who says things that hurt our feelings or offend us or frustrate us. It's a natural reaction based on our simple ignorance. By the way, I'm not better than anybody else guilty of doing the same thing, but this is the challenge. But when we pull away from people, that leads to isolation. Now, something that gets talked about a little bit less, but I think is equally important, is the isolation that many families with autism in the family feel. And especially, I think, parents face the most difficult challenge here. I mean, it's hard to compare, but I think that the parental challenge is really tough, because if you have a child and you don't know how your child is going to act or what they're going to say or what they're going to do in a given situation, and you have enough negative experiences in your past to go on, the natural tendency is going to be to pull away from social situations. And by social situations, I need to point out, I don't mean dinner parties. I mean going to get a haircut, going out to Denny's, the basic things that we do every single day. Enough bad experiences, it would only be natural to not want to be in a situation where there are people around who don't know that your child has autism or who don't understand autism. So that can lead to either complete isolation or at the very least isolating with a very small group, a small social circle. But that's still not healthy, and it certainly doesn't lead to happiness. But that's the isolation they feel. I can tell you that it's broken my heart. I've read stories of parents who on Thursday were having panic attacks just thinking about the trip to the grocery store they had planned on Saturday. Something we do every day, don't even think twice about, is this major issue in many families' lives. So this is the isolation, and there's just many more examples, but it's just a couple examples of the isolation or how autism can lead to isolation for people with autism and their families. This is also what Blue Power is about, because just so you know, now you guys all have Blue Power. What Blue Power is two things. First, it's a little bit of knowledge about autism, and now you guys have a little bit of knowledge. And by the way, it's okay to have a little bit. I only have a little bit of knowledge about autism. I'm so completely ignorant. But I know a little, and now you do too, but with that little bit of information, we can act on it, and that's the second part of Blue Power, is acting on that knowledge to help end the isolation people with autism and their families can often feel. The reason why we can affect this change is because the opposite of isolation is simple, positive human interaction. It's simply being around a person or a family with autism and not looking the other way. It's a friendly smile, it's a kind word, it's a reassuring comment to a parent, or perhaps even striking up a conversation with someone with autism or their family. But all of these things, done in a positive way, are the opposite of isolation, and they are literally the antidote to isolation. So Blue Power is having knowledge and acting on it. All of us will be in a situation many times in our lives where we're going to be around someone with autism. Now, you might be a little bit scared or unsure how to approach it, so I'm going to give you just a couple quick tips that might help you interact with someone with autism or their families. And from there, again, the challenge is for you to act on it. Again, these are such generalizations, but it's a place to start. So the first is, because you now understand the theory of mind, understand that the person with autism may not know the result of what they say or what they do until they say or do it. So simply don't be offended by anything they say. Don't be hurt. Don't be frustrated. Understand that it is a disability, and without that theory of mind, there is no other option in communication other than to say it and wait to see what happens. But if you understand that they have difficulty, I hate the term they, it's a general term, but that many people with autism have this difficulty, then you can be very understanding of it and forgiving of it. The second thing is, because you understand, remember the thing with about the fusiform, right? Picking up on facial expressions? Well, understand when you speak with someone with autism, it usually helps to just speak very literal. The part of the brain that interprets language is not the same part of the brain that picks up on social cues and facial expressions or other things. It's literally a different part of the brain, and in many cases, someone with autism can understand you just fine, but it helps to speak very little. It's possible they won't get your jokes. Sarcasm can be challenging, but if you say exactly what you mean, a lot of times communication can happen quite easily. The third thing is just one more tip, an interesting fact, is there's something called perseveration that many people with autism face. It's one of the most common characteristics. What perseveration is the fixation on one area of interest to the exclusion or near exclusion of all others. It's a hyper-focusing on one area of interest. I've heard at a conference it referred to as a feedback loop. Seems pretty accurate to me. Because you understand now that people with autism often perseverate on one area of interest, it helps to engage them in their area of interest. So for example, if you're on a Frisbee golf course and you see someone with autism and you know they have autism and you want to talk to them and you see them wearing a Harley Davidson shirt and a Harley Davidson hat and a Harley Davidson belt buckle, for example, and you walk over to them with a disc golf bag on your shoulder, don't expect that they're going to talk disc golf with you. You can try and you may have success, but there's a decent chance that's not where the conversation is going to go. However, I can almost guarantee you, I can generalize in this one pretty much most of the time, if you engage them in their area of interest, you could have this incredibly interesting, rich, insightful conversation, maybe even a bizarre conversation. I mean that in the best possible way, but just incredibly interesting. But if you engage them in their area of interest, it's a great starting place for the interaction. And the final thing is, now everyone at this event has met Patrick. Well, if you want to know an icebreaker, all you need to do is walk up and say, hey, I got a good friend named Patrick who has autism. What's your son's name? Or what's your daughter's name? Or what's your name? And that's it. That's what this is all about. This is what Blue Power is all about. You have knowledge now about autism a little bit, and the challenge is simply to create positive human interaction with someone with autism and their family when you are in this situation that you have an opportunity to do so. And that is a challenge to all of you. Act on your knowledge, don't look away, and by doing so, this will lead to less isolation than this family or this individual most likely felt yesterday when there was no disc golfers around. So that's Blue Power. Thank you for listening.